Good morning, everyone. And thank you for inviting me to be a part of this wonderful worship service this morning. I am Dr. Shawnee Daniels-Sykes, and I am representing the Christian Catholic perspective, but also as you listen to my reflections, you'll hear a little bit of liberation theology in my reflections. So in reflecting on the title of our time together this morning, Reviving Peace, Inspiration, Education, and Action for Change, it is quite fitting that the story of Joseph in Genesis underscores our worship service theme this morning. Many biblical authors note the place of the Joseph story in Genesis because this story so closely parallels the Exodus event, where the Israelites were instructed by God, Moses and Aaron, to help free the Israelites from captivity in Egypt, a place where they were enslaved. In the end, Pharaoh did let the people go, and God was in charge of their journey to the Promised Land. Textually and chronologically, the Joseph story in the book of Genesis precedes the story of the Exodus event in the book of Exodus. There persists, however, the pervasive mystical theme throughout the biblical tradition of what a God of justice, love, and right relationships demonstrates for us perpetually and eternally. That is, even amidst the struggles, the unrest, the hardships, the unearned privilege, contempt, hatred, envy, jealousy, racism, Islamophobia, untruths or lies, sexism and homophobia, heterosexism in our lives. God mandates a teleology, or an end, that results in a liberation, redemption, and deliverance, revealing to us that ultimately all will be well. Yes, I believe that God speaks to us in our dreams, too. As I read and reread and reflected on the Joseph story, I could not help but to note that Joseph was considered a master dreamer. Examples of his dreams that he would share with his family members, especially his brothers, tended to put him in places of honor, power, and authority. Those places were above and seemed to dominate his brothers, which proved to be morally problematic for them. More specifically, I maintain that Joseph's dreams were a foreshadowing of his being in a position of power, honor, and authority in Egypt. The question that emerged is, was that a power with or a power over in his dreams? Was Joseph set up to be a peacemaker or a peace destroyer? And how would Joseph revive peace among his brothers, given that they had deep-seated contempt and envy towards him? For example, observing, feeling, and claiming that Joseph was a highly favored one of his father and patriarch Jacob, his brothers disliked this so-called unearned privilege bestowed upon Joseph. This caused his brothers to denigrate and belittle, hurt, and or wanting to kill Joseph. In other words, they, except for his brother Reuben, conspired against him to destroy Joseph by stripping and tarnishing his long, majestic tunic given to him by his father. They threw him inside a cistern or a pit to die via starvation, the consumption of wild beasts, poisonous insects, reptiles, and or rodents. Sold to the Ishmaelites for 20 pieces of silver, some Midianites, traders, retrieved him from the cistern and took him to Egypt to be sold to Potiphar, a courtier of Pharaoh and his chief stewards. Given a ruling power position in Egypt, eventually Joseph could no longer contain himself in the presence of his attendants. The type of position did not fit who he was authentically as a person. He experienced struggles and sadness despite his heroic, authoritative, and commanding role in Egypt. Meanwhile, his brothers set out to find him. They discovered him in Egypt, and Joseph beckoned them to come closer to him, saying, quote, "I am Joseph, your brother," unquote. He asked them not to be distressed and not to reproach or blame themselves for having sold him to Egypt. And revealing the truth to his brothers, humbly, he let them know that God set him there ahead of his father and brothers because of the famine, which prevented the harvest. Further, Joseph explained that God sent him to secure and protect the land of Egypt, to ensure that there must remain a remnant on earth, and to save their human lives as an extraordinary deliverance or liberation. Joseph, in essence, was graced by God to provide and to care for his family and their descendants. As one understands how God works in each of our lives, one can see how the master dreamer Joseph was only following his dreams revealed and crystallized for him by the divine. The brothers prejudged Joseph for what they considered dreaming, and then boasting about a negative and malign use of power, which in turn they misconstrued perhaps as totalitarianism, dictatorial, or tyrannical. In the end, I believe that Joseph was a conduit used by God for reviving peace, and not a threat wielding power over the other. So in thinking about that, we can ask ourselves, who are examples of the Josephs that we know in our lives from history? Jesus Christ, for sure. Martin Luther King, Alice Hamilton, Fannie Lou Haber, Cesar Chavez, Rachel Carson, Bayard Rustin, among many others who engaged in reviving peace, inspiration, education, and action for change. In conclusion, I draw on the late poet and author Maya Angelou, who in this poem captures for me the benign and divine character of Joseph, the master dreamer and peacemaker. So by Maya Angelou, and I quote, "Lift up your eyes upon the day breaking for you. Give birth again to the dream. Women, children, men, take it into the palms of your hands. Mold it into the shape of your most private need. Script it into the image of your most public self. Lift up your hearts. Each new hour holds new chances for new beginnings." Unquote. Thank you.